Okay, so you're brushing your teeth, and out of nowhere your brain cuts to a scene, you're mid-argument, with someone who, let's be clear, is not in the bathroom with you, might not even be in your life anymore. And you're winning. Obviously. You always win this version. The comeback lands perfectly. None of that stammering you actually did when it happened for real. And for about 4 glorious seconds, you're the single most articulate person who has ever lived. And then it's just you in a bathroom, holding a toothbrush. If that sounds oddly specific, that's kind of the whole point. Because almost everyone does this, and almost nobody says it out loud. We rehearse conversations that already ended. We refight fights that are over. Sometimes we argue with people we haven't spoken to in years, in a shower at 7 in the morning, for no reason our conscious mind ever signed off on. So we're getting into why your brain keeps rerunning a conversation it already finished. And why the winning, honestly, turns out to be the strangest part of the whole thing. This isn't a glitch, and it's genuinely not a sign you're stuck on something you should be over. There's a name for it. There's research going back decades, and once you see the mechanism, the shower argument stops looking like a personal failing. So, let's start with the part that surprised me most when I first read about this, because it kind of flips everything. The replaying doesn't happen because you lost. If anything, it happens more when some part of you feels the conversation didn't land the way it should have. And watch what your brain does with that. It doesn't hand you a fair rerun where the other person also gets sharper lines. No, it hands you a version where you're devastating, they're flustered, and you walk off clean. You are, in your own imagination, undefeated. Which sounds great, right up until you realize the undefeated streak is exactly why the loop won't close. There's a whole field of research on this, and honestly it has one of my favorite unglamorous names in all of psychology. Imagined interactions. That's the real term. A researcher named James Honeycutt started building this line of work back in the late 1980s, studying the conversations people run inside their heads. Not the ones you plan for later, the ones you replay. He even gave the replay type its own label, retroactive imagined interactions, which is a very academic way of saying the fight you keep having in the car. And here's the detail I think about a lot. When researchers looked at what actually happens inside these imagined conversations, they found something a little embarrassing when you say it plainly. In your head, you talk more than the other person does. A lot more. The imagined version of the argument isn't really a negotiation between two people. It's more like a monologue with a very quiet co-star. You're not so much simulating the conversation as writing it, and then casting yourself in the only role that gets good lines. So why does the brain bother doing any of this? The classic explanation goes back almost 100 years. To a psychologist named Bluma Zygarnik. The story people love to tell is about waiters. She supposedly noticed that a waiter could hold a huge, complicated order in his head perfectly, right up until the food hit the table. Then, the second the plate went out, the whole order just evaporated. Done meant gone. She ran experiments on it, and for decades that became the tidy takeaway. Your brain grips what's unfinished and quietly drops what's complete. Now, I want to be straight with you here, because this is the spot where a lot of psychology videos would just confidently keep moving. The Zygarnik effect is a real idea, but the research behind it is messier than the clean version you usually get handed. When people recently went back and pooled all the studies together, that memory boost for unfinished tasks didn't hold up nearly as reliably as the waiter story makes it sound. So I'm not going to sell you a number. What does seem to survive is the softer cousin of the idea, which is that unresolved things have a way of tugging at your attention until they feel settled, and a conversation that ended wrong, your brain files that firmly under not settled yet. Okay, so here's where it gets interesting. Put those two pieces together, a mind that keeps poking at anything unresolved, and an imagined conversation system where you control the entire script, and you get the shower argument almost by accident. The unresolved feeling says, this isn't closed, keep working on it. The imagined interaction system says, cool, I'll run a simulation. And because you're the one writing that simulation, you naturally write yourself winning. Because who honestly sits down to imagine themselves losing? So the loop produces a victory every single time. But a victory in a conversation that never happened doesn't resolve anything real. The other person didn't hear your perfect line. Nothing out in the actual world shifted. The feeling that kicked the whole thing off is still sitting right there, undealt with. So your brain goes, still not closed, let's run it again. And that genuinely is the loop. Not madness, not obsession. Just a really well-meaning internal assistant that got handed a task it can't finish on its own, refreshing the same page over and over, waiting for a resolution that is never going to arrive from the inside. And look, there's something almost funny about this once you zoom out. Your brain evolved this genuinely sophisticated capacity for social simulation, the ability to model another mind and rehearse a hard conversation before it happens. Real, impressive machinery. And one of the main things we pointed at is winning imaginary arguments in the shower and then feeling vaguely unsatisfied. Millions of years of cognitive evolution, and the killer app is roasting your coworker while you condition your hair. Here's the part I find genuinely interesting, though. The research on how conflict stays alive in the mind suggests the replaying doesn't just fail to help. It can quietly feed the thing. The more you rehearse a grievance internally, the more available it stays. The easier it is to reach for the next time something reminds you of it. So the intuition that you're processing the conflict by running it again? That's often backwards. In a lot of cases, you're rehearsing it toward permanence, keeping a small fire lit in a room you don't even sit in anymore. So if you've been quietly assuming you're the only one who does this, or that it says something unstable about you, well, you're really not, and it doesn't. This is one of the most common private behaviors there is. People do it on commutes, in the shower, walking to grab coffee, lying awake at 1 a.m. narrating a text exchange from Tuesday. Almost everyone runs some version of this simulation, and almost nobody ever brings it up, because it sounds a little unhinged the moment you describe it out loud. It isn't. It's just so normal that it hides in plain sight, tucked into the most boring minutes of your day, which is exactly why nobody notices how universal it is. Now, I'd love to tell you that understanding all of this makes it stop. It doesn't. You can know the precise name of the mechanism. You can understand imagined interactions cold, and you will still catch yourself some random Thursday, delivering a devastating closing statement to your bathroom mirror. Knowing why it happens doesn't flip a switch. What it does change is how it feels while it's happening. Instead of why am I like this, you get to think, oh, right, this again. Brain's got an open tab it can't close. That shift sounds small. Honestly, it's most of what's actually available here. So the next time you catch yourself mid-argument at the sink, toothbrush in hand, winning an award-worthy debate against someone who isn't there, you don't have to fix it or shut it down or feel weird about it. You can just clock it for what it is, the loop running again, chasing a win that was never going to close it. This isn't your brain malfunctioning. It's your brain finishing a sentence you started, out loud, without you. And the loop actually settles when the feeling underneath it gets a little air, usually out here in the real world, in a real conversation, or even just a line written down in a notebook, not in the replay. If you want to go deeper on how memory and attention actually work, why your mind grips some things and lets others go, I've left a couple of the psychology books that made this click for me down in the description. And for the record, I only link the ones I've actually read. If any of this felt a little too familiar, stick around, because your brain runs a whole catalog of these quirks, and we're going through them one at a time.